You know what I don't miss at all? That brutal week before my period when I'm exhausted and all I want is sweets. All of them. I'm talking chocolate, cookies, chips, basically anything with sugar or salt. It's like my body takes over and I can't stop. That's when I found Happy Mammoth. It's so much easier to manage PMS with their estro control. Happy Mammoth is the company that created Hormone Harmony, and they're dedicated to making women's lives easier. That means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and honestly, it shows. The biggest benefit to Hormone Harmony is really feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews. And there are literally over 17,000 reviews for Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code DIARIES at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DIARIES for 15% off today. A special thanks to Happy Mammoth for sponsoring today's episode.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey guys, back at the playground again, huh?
Yep. You know what this playground could use? A wine country.
Heck yeah, and some waves so we could go surfing.
Oh, yeah.
Love that.
A redwood forest would be cool.
I'm in.
Ski slopes.
Let's do it.
Can a girl go shopping?
Yeah, baby.
Wait! Did we just invent California?
Discover why California is the ultimate playground at visitcalifornia.com.
If you want to listen ad-free and get access to all 4 of our journal entry episodes, then make sure you subscribe either on Apple Podcasts or head over to patreon.com/themurderdiariespod. It's only $2.99 a month. And again, you get to listen ad-free and you get access to all 4 journal entries episodes.
Welcome to the Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige.
In late 1987 in Akron, Ohio, women were being mysteriously murdered. One after another, their brutalized bodies were discovered in remote areas. Joanne Bartholomew had been stabbed to death and dumped in the woods. Marcia Potter, also stabbed to death, was found in her car. Barbara Blatnick was sexually assaulted and strangled, her body left along a roadside like garbage. It was an epidemic of murderous savagery that had a small community shocked and reeling in fear for their daughters, mothers, and wives. It all began back in August of that year, when Janice Christensen went out on a morning jog and never returned home. Known by her neighbors as a lovely young woman who took pride in her physical fitness and appearance, Janice was a busy young computer operator who was happily married to her husband, Ken. They were married for 7 years at the time of her death. Those who knew Janice best thought of her as a friendly, quiet, and unassuming friend and family member. But all of that came to an end on August 11th, 1987, when Janice's body was found on a bike and hike trail in Hudson, Ohio. Her husband reported her missing when she didn't return from a jog on August 10th. The next morning, he took their dog to look for her on the trail where she regularly ran. But instead of finding his wife alive, he discovered her body cold and bloody. She'd been sexually assaulted and stabbed 5 times. Near the crime scene was a set of footprints in the mud, as well as shoelaces that didn't belong to her. So who killed Janice Christensen and left her body in heavy underbrush on that secluded trail? Janice was just 31 years old when someone viciously assaulted her and ended her young life. She had so much to live for. Friends who admired and appreciated her, and a loving husband who was looking forward to sharing the rest of his life with her. But that's a future that Janice was never allowed to realize. This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Now, for this episode, she is known as Janice Christensen, her married name. But but she was actually born Janice Beth Hewitt. She was born the day after Christmas in 1955 in a small town of Ohio to her parents Fred and Ann. She was one of 4 children along with her brothers Fred, Mike, and her sister Shirley. From all accounts, Janice didn't venture far from her home in her 31 years. She stayed local to the Akron community and built her life not far from her place of birth. Janice's neighbors, the Urbings, told stories of a friendly and helpful young woman who would often help unload hay to feed their cows and horses. Another neighbor said that Janice was a pleasant woman who would always wave when she jogged by. Janice met her husband, Ken Christensen, when she was in her early 20s, and it wasn't long before the two of them were wed on June 14, 1980. They settled down in the village of Peninsula, Ohio, which is a small community near Cuyahoga Falls on the outskirts of the Akron metropolitan area. Ken and Janice had exciting relocation plans in the works, a new adventure in a new state. They were planning to move to Florida in late 1987. Life was looking pretty good for Janice and Ken.
At the time of her death, Janice was working part-time at the Cuyahoga Falls General Hospital. She'd worked full-time for 7 years as a computer operator in the hospital's information services department, but scaled her hours back so she could spend more time with her family before moving south with Ken.
Monday, August 10th, 1987 was like any other morning for Janice and Ken. They woke up early to go to the gym together, and then after their workout around 7 a.m., Ken left directly from the gym to go to his job as a foreman for a landscaping company. Janice and her mother, Ann, had an afternoon of shopping planned for that day. So after she returned home from the gym, Janice called her mom around 9:30 a.m. to let her know that she was going to go for a run before meeting up for their shopping date. Janice asked Ann to meet her at her house around 1 p.m., and they would leave together from there. It was shortly after this that Janice drove her car to the bike and hike trail in Hudson, Ohio. It's a local trail that Janice used often, and it was just a quick 10-minute drive from her home in Peninsula. And as planned, Ann Hewitt arrived at Janice's home just before 1 p.m. that afternoon. Neither Janice nor her car were at the house, so her mother waited around for Janice to return from her run. But an hour passed, and still no Janice. Concern crept into Ann's mind. Where was her daughter? Ann went home and spent the afternoon calling Janice's house every 15 minutes or so, never able to get her on the phone. With worry growing in her heart for the welfare of her daughter, Ann decided to return to Janice's house so she could be there when Ken arrived home from work. There was still no sign of Janice or her car when Ken got home that evening. But everything else inside the Christensen home looked completely normal. According to a statement Ken later gave the police, he noticed that Janice had, quote, left everything the shape she normally did when she went running. Janice's purse, wallet, and personal effects were all in the right places they would normally be. The only thing missing from the home were her running clothes, her 1983 orange Toyota Tercel, and, of course, Janice. It didn't take long for Ken and Ann to realize something out of the ordinary was going on. It was unlike Janice to just disappear for hours on end. She was a homebody who kept a fairly regular schedule. So by 5:45 p.m., they realized it was time to call the Cuyahoga Falls police and report her missing. According to the police report, Ken filled investigators in on Janice's routine, that she usually went jogging on the bicycle trail that stretched from Seasons Road to the expressway in Stowe. This area was checked, and Janice's car wasn't there. Ken gave police details about other parks that Janice frequented, which were subsequently searched, but again, to no avail. Janice and her car were nowhere to be found. When asked about their relationship, Ken told the police that there were no marital problems between the two of them, especially nothing that would make her leave. They were happily married. He also told investigators that Janice had no medical or mental health issues, and as far as he knew, things had been fine for her at work. Ken had also already checked in with the only friend that Janice had in the area, who told him that she hadn't seen or heard from Janice that day. Janice's mom, Ann, corroborated with everything that Ken told the authorities. There was simply no logical reason for Janice to just decide to up and leave town. She was a good person, a committed wife, and loyal to her family. Where else would she go?
It was at this time the local police entered Janice into their system as missing. They also contacted adjoining jurisdictions as well as the National Park Service. Ken and Anne were instructed to call the police if they heard anything more. It would be a long night for both of them as they waited for something, anything, that would let them know why Janice has disappeared so suddenly.
Ken Christensen tossed and turned that first night after Janice's disappearance. There was barely any sleep to be had as his mind raced with questions about what could have possibly gone wrong for his wife. When he did sleep, he dreamt that she was falling. In his dreams, there was an overwhelming feeling that Janice had been hurt in some way. This dark, intuitive omen shook him to his core, and the bad feelings he had hung like a pall throughout the night. The early light of dawn was just barely forming around the windows of his home when Ken jumped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight and a blanket, leashed their Rhodesian Ridgeback dog Wolf, and headed out toward the nearby bike and hike trail in Hudson. The park was quiet and empty when Ken and Wolf arrived. Ken didn't see her car in the trail parking area, but began to search for her anyway. He called out Janice's name as he and Wolf moved down the trail, swinging his flashlight beam into the surrounding woods and dense bushes. And at around 6:30 a.m., Wolf sniffed his way to an area filled with overgrown brush. It was at this point that Ken let the dog take the lead, and Wolf quickly led Ken to Janice's body. She was lying in the underbrush, partially clothed with blood on her shirt. Ken knelt and touched her arm, but it was ice cold. He dropped his flashlight and sprinted out of the trail park toward the nearest house he could find to call the police. When authorities arrived at the bike and hike trail, the area around Janice's body was declared a crime scene. As for her exact location, it was on the secluded trail east of State Route 8, south of Streetsboro Road, and about a quarter of a mile north of Barlow Road. Her body was laying 20 feet west of the actual trail used for hiking and biking. She had been sexually assaulted and then stabbed to death in the chest with a sharp instrument that was, in all likelihood, a knife. The autopsy would later determine that the attack and murder took place at approximately 10 a.m. on the morning of August 10th. DNA evidence in the form of semen was sent off for testing. Near her body, investigators found footprints in the mud and a pair of shoelaces that didn't belong to the shoes that Janice was wearing. Janice's car keys were missing, and there was no murder weapon found at the scene. There was also no sign of a struggle. Now that Janice's body had been found, authorities really needed to find her car. So they sent a helicopter into the air over the bike and hike trail, and it did multiple passes across the area in an effort to find it. But there was still no sign of it. And then 6 days later, on the evening of August 16th, a police sergeant was doing a routine check of a Revco discount drugstore parking lot. And this parking lot was in the neighboring community of Bedford, which is about 12 miles from the bike and hike trail where Janice was murdered. And it was during this stop that he was approached by a Revco employee who told him that there had been an orange Toyota parked in the store parking lot for almost a week. The sergeant is quoted as saying, "The Toyota was parked more or less in front of the store, but off to the side where the employees parked, and it appeared to be in good shape." The sergeant ran the Toyota's license plate and discovered that it was in fact Janice's car. It was towed to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, where investigators dusted the vehicle for fingerprints and other evidence. But unfortunately, no helpful clues were found in the Toyota. Police were grasping at straws. They even re-examined an assault case that had occurred 6 weeks before Janice had been murdered. For a little context, this is what happened in June of 1987. A 17-year-old female jogger had been sexually assaulted at knife point on a secluded jogging path in the top of the world area of Hampton Hills Park in Cuyahoga Falls. This is about 8 miles from where Janice's body would be later found that summer. And just like in Janice's case, the assailant bound this young girl's wrist with shoelaces he had brought with him and also took her car keys. Fortunately, the young girl survived the attack and helped police come up with a composite sketch of her assailant.
He was white, 55 to 60 years old, about 155 pounds, had graying hair, a full mustache, wore silver-framed glasses with thick lenses, and had a, quote, wrinkled, ruddy, or sunburned face. Could this have been the same person who raped and stabbed Janice Christensen to death? This episode of the Murder Diaries is brought to you by Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, pastries, and pastas. Wild Grain's boxes are fully customizable to your tastes and dietary restrictions. In addition to their classic variety box, they recently launched a new gluten-free box and a plant-based box that is 100% vegan. Best of all, they take the hassle out of baking since all items bake from frozen in 25 minutes or less with no mess or cleanup. They have so much to try, but so far I have loved their croissants and their sourdough. It's such an elite experience to have a croissant come out of your oven. That's not something that's super easy to bake, and definitely not in under 25 minutes like Wild Grain allows. It's convenient and delicious, and it also is such an elevated experience because your house smells so good. On top of it just being convenient, it makes your daily, weekly meals so much easier. Having a croissant in under 25 minutes on a weekday, you can't beat that. Are you ready to bring all your favorite carbs right to your doorstep? Be sure to check out Wild Grain so you can begin building your own box of artisanal breads, pastas, and pastries. For a limited time, Wild Grain is offering our listeners $30 off the first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/diaries to start your subscription. You heard me, free croissants in every box, and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/diaries. That's wildgrain.com/diaries, or you can use the promo code diaries at checkout.
The best piece of money advice I ever got was simple. Practice saving instead of spending. I know it sounds basic, but trust me, it really hit home. Just a few bucks for my paycheck tucked away for a rainy day. And at first it seemed like a tiny step. But then I realized how much that little habit had the potential to grow over time. It clicked that saving and investing aren't just about building a cushion for emergencies. They're about setting yourself up for a stronger future. That's why I love Acorns. It makes saving and investing feel so effortless, kind of like how that small savings habit started. Over time, those small contributions add up and gives your money the chance to grow. It's one of the best ways to build on a simple habit and let time do the heavy lifting for you. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change. I sincerely believe Acorns is a game changer because it makes investing easy and accessible for anyone, even if you're just starting with spare change. For me, it turned a small habit of saving into a bigger strategy for the future, giving my money a chance to grow without me having to think about it, just like that first step of putting a few bucks away. Sign up now and join the over 13 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/diaries or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid non-client endorsement compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorn Advisors LLC and SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/diaries.
One of the not so secrets of celebrities and influencers is that so many of them have had lipo. I'm thinking of one right now that I was just listening to on a podcast talk about their experience getting lipo, and they documented it on reality TV. Look, no one has the perfect body, but lipo has changed, and Sono Bello has been at the forefront with using LAL technology and getting these beautiful natural outcomes for each person. Sono Bello is offering you, our listeners, their best deal. You're now included in being able to access their New Year's savings event, but appointments are limited. Sono Bello doctors are masters in microfat laser removal, a brilliant technique that removes stubborn fat permanently. Wherever your problem areas are, that fat is gone in one comfortable visit. Eating healthy and workouts are important. Keep doing that. But if you want to lose that stubborn fat in one visit, check out Sono Bello. Remember, you can access their New Year's savings event by scheduling your free consultation now at sonobello.com/diaries. That's Sono, BELLO.com/diaries.
Let's be real.
Losing weight can feel like a huge challenge. That's why Hers is making it easier. With access to GLP-1 medications and personalized expert support, they're helping you take control and make your goals feel within reach. Hers is changing the way women approach healthcare by offering affordable, personalized weight loss treatments delivered right to your door, if prescribed. Their holistic weight loss program includes options like compounded GLP-1 weekly injections, which is the same active ingredient found in Ozempic and Wegovy, or oral medication kits tailored to fit your unique needs. Getting started is simple. Just fill out an online intake form and a licensed medical provider will create a plan that works for you. If prescribed, your program will include medication, ongoing care, and online support, all at one affordable price with no hidden or membership fees. With plans starting at just $165 per month for compounded GLP-1 injections on a 12-month plan, Hers makes it easier to access the treatment you need. So if you've been struggling with your weight loss journey, Hers is here to help you find a solution that works for you. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/diaries. That's FORHERS.com/diaries for your personalized weight loss treatment options. Forhers.com/diaries. Hers weight loss is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
While Hudson Township Police worked full-time on Janice's murder investigation, the mystery would deepen, as 3 other women turned up dead in the Akron area. First was 48-year-old Joanne Bartholomew. Born in March of 1939 and a native of Akron, Joanne was very involved in church work and activities at the time of her murder. She was the chairperson of the congregation of the church she attended, an assistant teacher of Christian education classes, as well as a representative of the church executive committee. Joanne had been previously employed as a health and physical education teacher. Married to her husband Charles Bartholomew for 26 years, Joanne and Charles had 2 sons and owned and operated a Dairy Queen together. Charles Bartholomew was quoted as saying, "Joanne was my best friend, my business partner, the mother of my children. We had a great marriage and our church was in the middle of it." But on Wednesday, October 21st, 1987, Joanne was last seen leaving church services around 8 p.m. After church, she went to the Chapel Hill Mall to look at VCRs that were on sale. Joanne's husband, Charles, got home from work around 9 p.m. on Sunday night, and Joanne wasn't home yet. He assumed that she'd stayed late for her church meeting, so he made himself some dinner, watched the Twins play the Cardinals in Game 4 of the World Series, and wound up falling asleep on the couch. But when Charles woke up around midnight, Joanne still wasn't home and her car wasn't in the garage. That's when he began worrying. Charles went out driving to try and find Joanne. He retraced the path he thought Joanne might have taken from church to home, but didn't see anything suspicious. He eventually returned home around 5:30 a.m. and began reaching out to Joanne's friends on the phone to see if anyone, knew where she was. But nobody had seen her. And that's when Charles called the police to report Joanne missing. The next day, Charles went out searching for Joanne again. And this time he found her car near the main entrance of the Chapel Hill Mall. He reported this to the police, and other family members joined the search for Joanne. And 2 days later, Joanne's body was discovered. Relatives had found her in a wooded area near the Chapel Hill Mall. She was found lying face up, about 25 feet into a wooded lot above a highway embankment. She was partially clothed and had been sexually assaulted, then stabbed to death in the chest.
Joanne's murder was eerily similar to Janice's, and immediately the community was on edge and abuzz as to whether these two cases might be connected. Maybe there was a serial killer at large. But that and other questions related to her death went unanswered. Joanne Bartholomew's murder is still unsolved to this day.
Then, a couple months later, on December 15th, Marcia K. Potter was found dead in her car in Akron. 36 years old, Marcia had been a lifelong resident of the Akron area. Known for her love of decorating her home for the holidays, Marcia was really looking forward to Christmas of 1987. She'd been married to her husband Larry for 5 years, and she had 2 children from previous relationships. Ominously, Marcia had been aware of the murders of Janice and Joanne. In fact, her friends remember her being worried about these crimes and telling everyone she knew that they all should take precautions to try and avoid becoming victims themselves. December 14th was a particularly busy day for Marcia. She had a long list of errands to run before meeting up with her parents at St. Martha's Church in Akron, where the 3 of them would play bingo late into the evening. Afterwards, at around 10:30 p.m., Marcia's parents, Fred and Joan, walked Marcia to her car in the church parking lot, where they said their goodbyes. This was the last place and time that anyone saw Marcia alive. As December 14th turned into the early hours of December 15th, Marcia's husband, Larry, woke up around 4:30 a.m. to discover that Marcia had never made it home from bingo the night before. He immediately reached out to her friends and family, but nobody seemed to know where she was. That's when Larry called the police to report her missing, and Marcia's family gathered to start searching for her. The first and only search for Marcia lasted all day Tuesday, December 15th, but it turned up no clues. Marcia's family agreed to pause their search and resume their efforts at first light the following morning. But they would never get around to it, because about the time Marcia's friends and family were wrapping things up, 2 tenants of an apartment complex off North Pershing Avenue in Akron found the body of a woman in a car in the apartment complex parking lot. It was 11:30 p.m. and the car and body belonged to that of Marcia. She was found sprawled across the front seat of her car, fully clothed and stabbed repeatedly in the neck. Her purse had been emptied and all credit cards and money had been stolen. And just like Joanne Bartholomew's murder, Marcia Potter's has gone unsolved to this day. It was only a few days after Marcia had been discovered stabbed to death in her car that another of Akron's young women, just a teenager in this instance, was found dead. Barbara Blatnick had been sexually assaulted and then strangled. Her nude body had been dumped in a wooded area in the Cuyahoga Falls. Barbara Ann Blatnick was born on November 20th, 1970, to John and Terry Blatnick. And at just 17 years old, Barbara had been a student at Erie Catholic High School at the time of her death. A fun-loving teen, Barbara was a fan of heavy metal music and enjoyed hanging out with her friends, partying, and dancing. But she could also be a homebody and had a close relationship with her mother. On Saturday, December 19th, Barbara was looking forward to attending a party not far from her house in Garfield Heights. She promised her mother that she would finish up her weekend chores on Sunday, and then she headed out for the night. After a few hours and as many drinks, Barbara called her dad around 10:30 p.m. to say that she would be home soon. Barbara's mom, Terry, waited up for her on the couch, but the hours passed and Barbara never came home. Hoping that Barbara played it safe and stayed at a friend's house, Terry drifted off to sleep and then was jarred awake by a nightmare. In the dream, Barbara said, "I love you, Ma, but I have to go." And in that same dream, Terry watched her walk away, disappearing into a tunnel of light. The next morning, Terry told her husband John about the dream, but he didn't believe it. It was just a dream, and he wasn't convinced anything bad had happened to his daughter. The hours passed, and Barbara still hadn't returned home. And even more perplexing to her parents, there had been no word from her. She hadn't telephoned to tell them what was going on. Terry and John began reaching out to her friends, asking if anyone had seen her the night before or even that morning. Nobody had. The nightmare seemed to be turning into reality. And around 3 p.m. on Sunday afternoon, Barbara's dad was picking up the phone to call authorities to report Barbara missing when the doorbell rang. The police were standing on the Blatnick front porch, hats in hands, with somber expressions on their faces. John and Terry Blatnick were informed that around 10 a.m. that morning, an oil and gas employee had found Barbara's nude body. It had been dumped in a wooded area off O'Neill Road, which is a couple dozen miles from her home in Garfield Heights. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Then a friend came forward, and they told the police that they had dropped Barbara off near her home at the corner of Warner Road and Grand Division the night before. With this added information, police began to piece together what they believe had happened. They believe that she had been killed near her home, and then the killer had driven her body out to O'Neill Road. But they weren't convinced that Barbara's murder was related to the murders of the other 3 girls. She was younger and she'd been strangled, not stabbed. But despite this divergent MO, authorities across the multiple jurisdictions realized it was time to start working together to figure out what exactly had happened to these 4 victims. Akron, Cuyahoga Falls, Hudson, and Summit County Police formed a task force with the FBI and state authorities. They tested DNA from all 4 cases to see if it was linked to the same assailant. But the results were inconclusive. And while they continued to search for murder weapons in each case, none were ever found.
The tips and clues quickly dried up, and the task force disbanded after a year of effort. The prosecutor working closely with the task force said, even with all the relationships between all the investigative teams, we're coming up with nothing. Just absolutely nothing. I'm checking out online with a company I love, like Thrive Cosmetics, and I know that they use Shopify. I know as a consumer, I'm in good hands, and the company that I'm shopping with makes some pretty good decisions, if I do say so myself. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And it's not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%. This means there's way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no surprise, businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same system that Hailey Bieber trusts with Rode, that Selena Gomez trusts with Rare, and that Emma Chamberlain trusts with Chamberlain Coffee. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/murderdiaries, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/murderdiaries.
The murder cases of Janice Christensen, Joanne Bartholomew, Marsha Potter, and Barbara Blatnick all went cold. Decades of police work failed to yield an arrest. It seemed that police would never find the person or persons responsible for these tragic and terrible killings. To this day, no clues, leads, or tips have materialized to help police find out what happened to Marsha Potter and Joanne Bartholomew. For Chuck Bartholomew, Joanne's husband, all that remains are memories. He has since remarried and had 3 grandchildren, but he still relives the discovery of her brutalized body every day. It'll never go away, he said. For Barbara Blatnick, it would take more than 33 years before a break in the case came for police. In 2020, DNA that had been collected from Barbara's body back in 1987 was given to a California company that does forensic genealogy using DNA databases. Now, through this DNA, a family was flagged. And then with additional research and investigation, the police had their man. So in May of 2020, 68-year-old James Zastowick was arrested for the murder of Barbara Blatnick. At first, when confronted by police, the offender denied having even met Barbara. It doesn't ring a bell, he told detectives. But when they told him that his DNA connected him to her murder, James suddenly had a vivid recollection of meeting her, something we've seen with offenders over and over. He said he'd picked her up one cold night as she was walking along the side of the road. He took her back to his place so that she could use his phone and told police that shortly after, when one thing led to another, they had had consensual sex together in his bed. Afterward, he drove her to the corner of Grand Division and Warner Road and dropped her off. In May of 2020, Zasnowick was indicted for the 1987 slaying of Barbara, closing a cold case investigation that had spanned decades. He'd pleaded not guilty, but he would never be convicted of the killing. He died of cancer just 3 months later while awaiting trial. It would take even longer for Janice Christensen's murder to be solved. But it was the crack in Barbara Blatnick's murder that spurred police into taking another look into Janice's case. They hoped the same technique used to find James Zasnowick could be used to help find Janice's killer. In June of 2020, Hudson detectives working on the case reached out to the Ohio Cold Case Unit for support. At this time, Ohio Cold Case Unit investigator Lindsay Mussel said, "We do have good evidence in this case." She said every piece of evidence and existing fingerprints were being re-examined. But what they needed was something conclusive and uncontestable. And very soon, they got it. Investigators working Janice's case were looking for comparable criminal patterns. And that's what they found in the June 1987 top-of-the-world sexual assault case. Remember the 17-year-old jogger who had been assaulted and attacked, tied up with shoelaces, while she walked along the hiking trail in Cuyahoga Falls? Well, in 2022, investigators resubmitted the DNA that had been collected from the survivor to BCI's laboratory and the FBI's CODIS database. They got a hit that led them inconclusively to Thomas Collier Jordan, a Cleveland man born in 1926 who died in 2009. Unable to find and test any living relatives of Jordan, investigators went to his resting place in Yuma, Arizona, and they exhumed his body for testing. Not only was his DNA a positive match for the June 1987 assault, but it also matched the DNA collected in the Janice Christensen case. Thomas Jordan had a criminal history that spanned nearly 50 years, and a laundry list of arrests to go along with it, an extensive record that included rapes, burglaries, and stabbings. Prior to Janice's murder, he'd spent multiple years in various prisons for his crimes, and was released in 1985, just 2 years before he attacked and killed her on the bike and hike trail in Hudson, Ohio. Considering his violent history, it's unlikely that Janice Christensen and the sexual assault survivor are his only 2 victims. His premeditated routine suggests that he'd been at this for a while.
After nearly 4 decades, Janice Christensen's family finally have a face and a name to the person who so carelessly ended her life. But when the person responsible for such a horrific crime dies before he's able to be brought to justice, how much can Janice's loved ones celebrate an outcome like this? If there's any possible closure to be had, it's weak at best.
To this day, the cases for Joanne Bartholomew and Marcia Potter remain unsolved. For a while, police thought Joanne's case might be related to the Janice Christensen murder. But DNA evidence eventually ruled that out. Media attention for Joanne's case has all but disappeared. At the time of this podcast recording, the last article written about Joanne's murder was in February of 2019. Her case grows colder with each passing year. During the investigation for Marcia Potter's murder, police believed the motive had been robbery, so they didn't really see a connection to the other 3 murders. They also thought that Marcia might have been killed by a family member. But in the end, they weren't able to gather enough evidence to substantiate this theory. And as a result, there's still no answer as to what happened to her on that cold December night. If you have information for either of these remaining unsolved 1987 murder cases, we urge you to contact the Akron police at 330-375-2552. That number is 330-375-2552.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at The Murder Diaries Pod and subscribe for ad-free listening and full access to all 4 Journal Entries episodes. Until next time,
stay safe.
Bye.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.